Welcome back to SOS. In this segment, we are discussing true crime and its effects on those who engage with true crime content. Let's get right into it. There are two groups of individuals who engage with true crime content. The first is consumers, and consumers watch true crime content purely for entertainment purposes or to pass time. The second group is comprised of sleuths, or armchair detectives. And sleuths are people who follow cases closely, keep up awareness, and engage regularly in discussions or advocacy about crimes in a mostly productive manner. It might surprise you to learn that both groups can demonstrate ethical and unethical behaviors. What does ethical engagement look like? It is victim-centered. It avoids sensationalism. It does not cause further harm, and it is responsible with information. Let's take a look at victim-centeredness. Too often, the offender is the name that takes on the life of the case. For example, the Chris Watts case. This is the most important piece because when we focus primarily on the offenders, we lose sight of the victims. Seeking justice is for victims, and it is why crimes are investigated in the first place. Let's take a look at the Watts family case to discuss how victim-centeredness changes how you look at it. In this case, the husband and father was found guilty of taking the lives of his wife, their unborn son, and their two daughters. This was an egregious crime against the four victims as he stole their lives. And as a community, we sought retribution through the justice system to charge and convict him of his transgressions. He also took from the community four wonderful people that would have contributed to society with their personalities, goals, and talents. And yet, it seems like what people mostly talk about in the Watts family case is about Chris Watts and his mistress. The ones that lost their lives seem to get lost in the discussion. In the context of true crime, an example of sensationalism is bending the truth to make a case appear more evocative. For example, you click on a thumbnail that states, "Man records final moments," because it elicits a strong emotional response. As you watch the video, you learn that the man's actual demise was not caught on video. It was mundane footage of their final moments leading up to their demise. This aspect can be difficult given the nature of many crimes, so I will resist harping on it. However, it does get out of hand. If you've ever opened the YouTube app, you might have experienced firsthand the inundation of shocking and graphic video titles or thumbnails that appear in the true crime realm. What you are seeing is known as shock value, which is intended to elicit a strong emotional response in the same way sensationalism does. Of course, discussing the material facts of a case can be important, but do we need to know from the title that someone was decapitated and then their flesh was used to fashion a coin purse? I would say no. And as someone who used to fall under the category of true crime consumer, I can tell you that the dark nature of true crime is harming your nervous system. This is far from opinion-based, as a 2025 study we will be examining substantiates the harm of compulsive true crime consumption. In terms of shock value, the problem isn't the material facts of the case, it is the way its presentation may reduce victims to the very vile acts inflicted upon them. Harms such as victim blaming or crossing privacy boundaries in relation to those involved in a case is what I'm talking about. We must remember that all victims and witnesses to crimes are humans with emotions that are affected by the things we say in comments or in our videos. You can say that words are just words, but that undermines the human condition. Some things are only said to be hateful or purely to cause harm. And if you feel that sting when you're about to say something or type something, that sting that tells you this will inflict pain on people who read it, maybe hit that backspace button. If a statement only serves to defame a victim or to justify their fate, then it is not helpful to the case. It's probably also not factual. It is more than likely irrelevant. and this extends beyond words. The victims of crimes have a right to privacy that often is ignored in the true crime community. Some sleuths have felt entitled to grift off privacy breaches they've made in relation to victims, and they were deservedly met with backlash. For instance, the YouTuber Zavgirl placed the autopsy photos of 11-year-old Gannon Stouch behind a paywall on her Patreon. This broke all the rules as it was indignant to the victim, it was sensational, it caused further harm to Gannon's family, and it indicated that Zavgirl was irresponsible with case information. In response to finding out his son's autopsy photos had been sold on the internet, Al Stouch told News Nation, quote, "The world got enough information from the trial to have every discussion they want to have. Why do we need to go have a freedom of information request and pay for this kind of information and then dishonor my son by putting these photos out there like that?" End quote. And the final condition, it is responsible with information. If something is not fact, do not disseminate it as though it is. Keep discussions of rumors to a minimum. Stick to the facts and documents. Let's discuss an example of how to fail miserably at this metric. Example, the TikTok user and self-professed psychic medium named Ashley Gillard has been involved in a defamation lawsuit against Rebecca Schofield, a professor at the University of Idaho, after Gillard made false claims that Schofield was behind the brutalization of the 4 university students in Moscow, Idaho. The lawsuit is ongoing, with Schofield seeking a jury trial as well as reimbursement for legal fees. Gillard's counterclaim asserts that Schofield conspired with her attorneys to avoid prosecution for her alleged crimes. This has amassed significant media attention and public interest due to its adjacency to the Idaho 4 case and Gillard's sizable TikTok following. In no less than 37 TikToks, Gillard used her tarot cards to attempt to solve this case. Despite any proof that Schofield was involved in the Idaho 4 tragedy, Gillard and her following maintain that justice has not been served. Do I need to explain why this is egregious, why this is absurd and incomprehensible? I'm a huge proponent of the value of free speech, but your rights to free speech do not protect you from the consequences of slander, defamation, or libel. Now we're going to examine how true crime overconsumption negatively shapes our mental health. The study I referenced earlier was by Catherine D. Coduto in Psychology of Popular Media. The 2025 study followed 280 participants and documented their responses to questions about their social media use, including compulsive social media use and outcomes from engaging with this content. Overall, they cited that a variety of negative outcomes were observed for those who engaged with the content, including increased negative feelings as they ruminated on the crimes, stating more acutely that findings suggest that some viewers may become preoccupied with these stories to the detriment of their own mental health and well-being. My personal observation of the true crime community aligns with the findings of this study. The sleuth community refers to the Watts family case as Watts Island, and there's this saying that once you step foot on Watts Island, you can never leave. Compare it to Hotel California, if you will. You can check out of the channels and Reddit forums, but the Watts case always seeps back into your mind like abysmal ink. I took some time to think about why this happens with this case. Of course, this phenomenon is popular with other cases. For example, JonBenet Ramsey, Madeleine McCann, the Black Dahlia, all cases unsolved so far. But what is it about the solved Watts family case specifically that causes it to take up so much free real estate in our minds? My analysis suggests a simple answer. It is likely due to hyperfixation on futile efforts such as motive and reasoning, understanding the offender's mindset, and deriving meaning where there is none. In my estimation, the true crime community remains largely centered around the offenders. I have observed that too many channels, or perhaps the loudest ones, remain fixated on trying to understand why Chris Watts ended his family's lives. They speculate about his state of mind before, during, and after the act. I believe that's a tedious and equally fruitless task. Chris Watts pretends that he doesn't understand why he did it, but we know that he knows exactly why he did it. If he never chooses to tell us, we must make peace with that. And further, we must consider that if he ever did give a reason, how wise would it be to take him at his word? Chris Watts was an adulterer, a liar, a life ender. Why would we trust his word now? He folded as soon as he realized investigators had him dead to rights. And listen, I've heard sleuths on this very platform refer to Chris Watts as a mastermind or a genius. And Chris Watts could be identified as many things, but a genius or a mastermind, he's far from it. And the facts of the case make it abundantly clear. Within a matter of days, law enforcement were able to ascertain that Chris Watts had a mistress, that tensions between he and his mistress seemed to spell at least a partial motive for his family's disappearance. And then very quickly, they found the family members at one of his job sites, which conveniently was set to be decommissioned in the near future. His biggest blunder was underestimating how much Shanann and the girls' absences would be felt. They were so loved by family and friends who expected to hear from them every single day. Meanwhile, Chris Watts was living it up in La La Land part-time with his mistress, not giving a dead moose's last shit about his kids or his wife. It proves how myopic and egotistical Chris Watts was, if anything, and I say all this to reinforce that Chris Watts is not worth understanding. For the purposes of criminal profiling, sure, it is worth understanding why someone would do this. In terms of protecting oneself and identifying concerning patterns of behavior that may indicate a person is capable of harm, yes, it's worth understanding. But ultimately, for the true crime community, there's nothing to glean here. Chris Watts was an all-around terrible human, especially in the last few months leading up to the act. He confessed, and he's serving a well-deserved life sentence. One reason that I wanted to start a YouTube channel was to assist in reshaping true crime engagement. True crime is just a portion of my content, and I designed my channel this way intentionally because I don't want to be pigeonholed into true crime content only. I want to present to you helpful information and education that might alter your perspectives, cause you to think about things you've never given thought to before, or inspire you to learn more, dig deeper, pick up a book. My primary motive regarding true crime is realigning the community's focus back onto victims, because I believe that if that shift is made, then meeting the other three metrics becomes a lot easier. How can I remain ethical in my true crime participation? And how can I protect myself from compulsive harm? The answer is intention. Being intentional about the content you consume and engage with. Being intentional about the thoughts and contributions you make in true crime forums. Being intentional about the victims and maintaining their sense of post-mortem sainthood. Victim blaming will never be tolerated on my channel, so consider this the only warning. I will instantaneously block those who choose to shame or bully victims. I'll point to the Watts family case as an example once again. Chris Watts' wife, Shanann, is relentlessly bullied and slandered by a group of shameless trolls even to this day. These trolls will drop in a comment section suggesting that Shanann deserved her fate because she was an MLM sales rep and an OG influencer. And this was really before influencing was cool. This goes without saying, but I will clue you in if you are not understanding why this is so demented. People don't deserve harm simply because you don't like their personality. People don't deserve harm simply because you dislike their profession. Harm is never justified, except in isolated instances where one is required to utilize self-defense. So for any viewers that think the justification of harm will fly in my comments, it won't. I believe the hate Shanann has endured stems from jealousy and misogyny. People don't blink when a man maintains that level of ambition in their professional pursuits. The jealousy, I believe, stems from Shanann's success on social media. She was ahead of her time with influencing. There are people today trying to emulate her blueprint and amass her level of success. I think there's more to learn from Shanann, Bella, and Cece than there is to learn from the monster who ended their lives. We can look at the videos and pictures and see the quality person Shanann embodied by how her daughters reflected those qualities. Bella and Cece were smart, kind, funny, resilient. They were loving and warm. We were robbed of knowing the legacy baby Nico would leave behind. If Chris Watts had embodied better qualities, we wouldn't even be here discussing this. So instead of conjuring fantasies, explaining why evil does what evil does, we should strive to write the legacies of the victims in indelible ink. And for this very last section, I've provided some ethical true crime channels on YouTube. Perhaps you've heard of them before, perhaps you haven't. The second list is a list of non-true crime channels for those looking to disengage from true crime.